I've said this before on the podcast, but I feel like especially Hollywood is still treating like China as China was in 2008. It is not the same country. It is not under the same leadership as it was then. And they are starting to pull back. They want to have China be the leader in everything. They don't want Western culture to influence the Chinese people at all because they, like you said earlier, the ideal situation is our culture, our way of life would infiltrate naturally. And they don't want that. So they want to keep power.
No.
So it is a tricky situation because, we talk about this all the time at FEE that, that free trade is good. It's if goods don't cross borders, troops will, which, it's all true. But this is, and I don't think the U.S. government should get involved, but I think the companies that do business in China, and this takes a lot of looking at the bottom line and really thinking like, what can we spend to make another James Bond movie? Because if you take $59 million out, or the Spectre made $84 million from China, which was the last James Bond movie. So you have to readjust your calculation on not having that money. That's a lot of money. That's a big ask. But
yeah,
these are the same companies that are pursuing boycotts against states in the United States over laws and are actually enacting change. And obviously we have a very different system of government than China, but they see it as a good to utilize their market force to enact social change here, but then totally disregard that view when it comes to China. And if you think it works for Georgia, for North Carolina, for Texas, then it should work for China. So, but it's not just it's a big, big market. But I think it comes down to what do you want the future to look like? Do you want to have the future free, or do you want it to have it look like Australia? It's kind of that kind of crossroads, unfortunately. And honestly, I think some of these companies prefer China because you can measure things a lot easier when your choices are made for you. And if you can just get in with one person, you have it made. You don't actually have to compete against anybody else because the party has deemed you acceptable. So it's tricky. It's tricky because on one hand, I think China would welcome Nike saying goodbye and not doing business in China, because then they would see it as an opening to do their own tennis shoes. How long that would last? Probably not that long. But you see this on the movie side. They want Chinese movies to be the biggest movies in the world. And when you have a government financing it, then you're going to have basically bottomless pockets. How long can China stay up with that? That's the biggest question. And that's the biggest unknown. Because even though they say they're doing great, it's...
Who really knows what the numbers actually are? Like, we have so little insight into that. But we do know that communism and socialism and other command and control economies and political setups do not work. They never have. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of just a matter of time, honestly. And it's going to really suck when it all comes falling down. Like, don't get me wrong. That's not going to be fun for anybody, especially the everyday people in China. And it's gut-wrenching. Mm-hmm. But
yeah,
I don't want to be cavalier about this, but right. Like, we know that it's going to end. And the best thing that we can do is not actively cater to the bad guys, for lack of a better term, and to be there to help support the Chinese people when that eventually does come all crashing down.
Mm-hmm. It's a tough. There's no easy answer.
No, there's not.
And in my view, the only wrong answer is getting governments more involved in the situation.
Yeah.
It's If Disney decides to go its to sever ties with China, I would support that move. I think the CCP
I'd
is,
probably start watching more Disney stuff, honestly.
but that just changes, like I said earlier, a lot of calculations and budgets, how you make movies. But I think it just comes down to viewing China for what it is and what it's not. It's not 2008. They're not becoming more and more open. They're going back to, unfortunately, Maoist doctrine, Great Leap Forward, and those kind of policies, which it's scary. It's scary.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because there was a time where what you were saying earlier, the free trade, our societies they were open to that to an extent.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. And companies need to realize that before it's too late.
Exactly.
So, not very uplifting. Not really any definitive answers. But
if this were easy, everyone would be doing it. So,
right.
But
I always like. I don't know if "like's" the right word, but I always want to talk about the CCP and bring light to the stuff that they're doing because
it's awful.
It is one. It's awful, but I think it's one of the most important topics in our culture today. We do not realize, or maybe the average consumer does not realize, how much sway China has over the stuff we see now. We are actively censoring ourselves for the Communist Party in China. That scares me.